Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a concept that honestly sounds entirely like science fiction, but is rapidly, and I mean rapidly becoming biological fact. We are talking about post-human evolution. We're going to explore how our newfound power to literally edit our own source code might fundamentally change what it means to be human. It's an absolutely incredible time to be alive, standing right on the precipice of this biological revolution where the traditional, totally arbitrary rules of nature are literally being rewritten. So let's just jump right in. To really wrap our heads around this massive shift, we have to start by asking the ultimate question. What actually happens when we can intentionally design the physical and intellectual limits of a human being? For decades, our entire framework for genetic engineering has been viewed strictly through the lens of therapeutics. We tend to think of it as, fixing broken DNA strands to cure diseases or prevent inherited conditions. And make no mistake, that is incredible, life-saving science. But there is a fascinating boundary we are quickly approaching. What happens when we cross the line from fixing a deficit to creating a literal unfair advantage? What happens when the science transitions from simple therapy to radical, intentional enhancement? Because we aren't just talking about preventing illness anymore. We are exploring the very real possibility of engineering individuals who possess capabilities far, far beyond the peak of natural human potential. Now, right off the bat, we need to separate the fiction from the facts. The biological upgrade of our species isn't going to start with some dramatic comic book lab accident. There are no vats of bubbling toxic waste, absolutely no radioactive spiders dropping from the ceiling, and no heavy cybernetic metal limbs. The scientific reality is actually far more elegant and honestly a whole lot more awe-inspiring. It begins with the completely silent microscopic editing of a single embryo's nucleotide sequence in a quiet laboratory. Just imagine, a generation born completely naturally, yet completely immune to every known virus. Or think about a child whose mind can effortlessly process complex multivariable calculus before they even hit their 10th birthday. The true superhuman revolution, it's entirely invisible to the naked eye. And the reason it's invisible is because science isn't using theatrical physics or invented magic here. The real-world execution of genetic modification bypasses all of that sci-fi stuff to exploit actual, known biological switches that are already hidden deep inside our own genome. We don't actually have to invent new traits from scratch, which, to me, is the most mind-blowing part of this whole thing. We just have to find the genetic levers that already control our biology and just pull them in the exact right direction. It's really less like building a brand new machine from the ground up and much more like accessing the hidden developer menus of the human body to unlock features that were previously just turned off by default. And we already know about some of these biological cheat codes. For example, by precisely editing the MSTN gene, which is what regulates muscle mass, an engineered individual would naturally develop massive, dense skeletal muscles. They would maintain elite athletic strength without ever stepping foot in a gym, which, let's be honest, sounds like a pretty amazing deal. Then there's the LRP5 gene. Activating specific variations here can render human bones virtually unbreakable. We are literally talking about a skeletal matrix so dense that a person could withstand high-impact trauma that would completely shatter a standard human skeleton. But the developer menu gets even wilder when we look at the brain and aging. Modifying the DEC2 gene amplifies sleepless efficiency. This means the brain can fully clear its metabolic waste and completely recharge in just 2 to 3 hours a night. I mean, imagine what you could do with an extra 20 years of awake productive time over the course of your life. And finally, optimizing the FOXO3 longevity gene clusters protects our cells from oxidative stress. This dramatically slows the biological clock, potentially extending a highly functional, youth-retaining lifespan well past 150 years. But we have to stop and ask, what happens when these genetic cheat codes go public? When biological talent basically becomes a purchasable luxury, the natural inequality of human society has the potential to expand into an unbridgeable evolutionary chasm. Think about it. Up until now, absolutely everyone, whether you're rich or poor, powerful or entirely unknown, has been subject to the exact same biological lottery of natural birth. We are all bound to the erratic, unpredictable mutations of traditional nature. But radical enhancement completely shatters that lottery. Humanity would literally split into 2 distinct evolutionary categories, the baseline humans left to the whims of nature, and a new engineered elite whose biology is fully optimized from day one. When you put these 2 paths side by side, the disparity is just incredibly stark. Take cognitive velocity, for instance. You have the baseline human, that's us, whose brain is limited by standard synaptic pruning and biological memory decay. Contrast that with the engineered superhuman operating with expanded working memory and near instantaneous pattern recognition. In terms of physical resilience, baseline humans are vulnerable to chronic disease, muscle atrophy as we age, fragile bones, you name it. The engineered class, however, they walk around virtually immune to cancer and viruses, holding on to permanent muscle and that incredibly dense bone matrix we just talked about. And contrasting a linear cellular decay that starts around age 30 with a decades-long physical plateau at absolute peak performance, well, that really drives home the difference. But the real kicker here is the access model. Baseline biology is our free, unoptimized heritage. The engineered biology, at least initially, consists of highly expensive proprietary genetic packages entirely restricted by wealth. But look, this chasm doesn't just stop at individual wealth. That's just the beginning. It rapidly escalates into a cold, calculated biological arms race on the global stage. The ultimate crisis of real-world superhumans is definitely not some cartoon villain plotting world domination from a secret volcano lair. It's a pragmatic, geopolitical competition between global superpowers. Because once this technology is proven to work, it ceases to be just a luxury for the ultra-rich. It immediately becomes a strict, unavoidable imperative for national security. Just picture it for a second. Imagine if one nation begins quietly producing generations of hyper-intelligent, sleepless military strategists who can work continuously around the clock without ever experiencing cognitive decline. Imagine the creation of elite pilots equipped with flawless, genetically engineered reaction times, or deep space-resistant astronauts whose cellular structure simply doesn't degrade in zero gravity. If one single country successfully implements this, rival nations are going to find themselves at a catastrophic strategic disadvantage. They will have absolutely no choice but to lift any and all ethical bans on human experimentation just to keep up. When push comes to shove, survival, not morality, is going to dictate the pace of the science. And this leads us to a massive paradigm shift in how global power is actually measured. The entire international theater would completely move away from comparing traditional metrics like nuclear arsenals, aircraft carriers, or, semiconductor chip manufacturing capacities. Instead, the focus would shift exclusively to what we can call genomic equity. The human gene pool itself literally becomes the ultimate piece of sovereign national infrastructure. The most critical asset a country possesses is no longer buried in the ground, it's quite literally in the DNA of its citizens. For global commentators and strategists, this transition rewrites the narrative completely. We stop talking about fictional characters with capes and start heavily analyzing the real-world legal, corporate, and physical realities of navigating a world with an enhanced class of people. And that brings us to our final, frankly haunting, dilemma, one that challenges the very foundation of modern society. As the gap between the engineered and the unengineered widens into an unbridgeable evolutionary chasm, humanity is going to be forced to answer its deepest question. Can we honestly maintain a unified concept of human rights when we no longer even belong to the same biological species? If our physical and cognitive realities become fundamentally unequal by design, how on earth do we build a society that actually works for both? It's a profound puzzle, and it's one we absolutely need to start thinking about right now, before the first fully engineered generation completely changes the rules of the game forever. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the architecture of post-human evolution. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.